Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. This is the afternoon session where we are covering two self-defense cases. I'll tell you right now, in Tennessee versus Sean Foley, the court is right now in a break. That means we get to go live back into the courtroom in the case of Florida versus Michael Drejka, the deadly parking lot shooting that we all saw the snuff film about this morning. On the stand right now is the sheriff's officer, Officer Forcade from Pinellas County. Let's listen. While the witness is setting up a presentation, I'd like to bring one of my guests in today. We were on together for the first time last week. Cheryl Dorsey, a retired sergeant from the LAPD. Good afternoon, Cheryl. Nice to have you back here at the Law&Crime Network.
Good afternoon. Great to be back.
Yeah, so we have a lot to talk about here. Okay, so we have, appears, a handicapped parking lot vigilante under an accusation that he committed this homicide, right, of poor Mr. Oh gosh, with the man with 5 kids. It just bothers me, Cheryl. I can't, Marquise McLaughlin. I can't even deal with it when I see that. When I see smiling faces like that with the kids in the car and the kid that he died in front of. If you were the officer investigating this, what would be the first thing you would look at?
Well, I'd want to know, why did this civilian insert himself in a place where he didn't need to be, right? And so, you know, the positioning of the person that was deceased, the cars, the statements are very important that the Mr. Drejka said initially when he was contacted by law enforcement as to why, what precipitated. Everything that led up to that confrontation is going to be very important for officers because he's claiming self-defense. And truthfully, you don't get to start a fight and then claim self-defense.
Well, let's see, because this is the case about the death of Marquise McLaughlin. Let's listen to what's going on in court right now. Officer Forcade is going back to the stand. Cheryl Dorsey, Cheryl, I'd like to bring you in. You were a police officer, right, in LA, right?
Yes.
As we know. Okay. I have a question for you. When you come upon a defendant like this, who you learn in your investigation, Cheryl, has had a prior incident over the same parking lot, how does that affect you as an officer and whether or not you're going to say to the prosecutor, hey, prosecutor, I want you to prosecute, even if previously you said you were not going to do it?
Well, as a first responder, I may not have all that information, right? It's something that'll be determined, something that's to be made, that prepare cases for filing and present to the district attorney. So those conversations are not anything that I would have, but I could tell you that I would not be swayed or moved by prior bad acts one way or the other. I'm looking solely focused on what's going on in this case, and do we have the evidence and the statements to present and substantiate a prima facie case for the charges.
But let me ask you this. If you say you wouldn't look at other incidents, but if it came to the attention that you were then put on to investigate other incidents and there wasn't a wall, let's say, between the investigating officers, how can it not affect you as to whether or not this person you're investigating is guilty of a crime or should be presented to grand jury?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, that's the whole point in putting something together that's solid, that will at least get a district attorney, a public prosecutor to agree with my findings, with my evidence, with the information that I've gathered from talking to everybody and interviewing the suspect, if you will. So my concern would be, why is this guy continuing to act this way, of course, after the fact, during the trial? What is going on with this guy that causes him to want to insert himself into situations that have nothing to do with him?
Well, that's one of the things only his defense attorney will know. I'll call it the equalizer effect, a show where somebody sought retribution for what they perceived were crimes or maybe were crimes. As you know, we are in the case of Florida versus Michael Drejka, who is accused of gunning down, shooting, snuffing out the life of Marquise McLaughlin in front of his five-year-old son. They're switching witnesses right now in the courtroom. Sheriff's Deputy Forcade just testified as to what he did when he was first on the scene. So let me bring in my guest, Cheryl Dorsey, a 25-year-old veteran, I believe, Cheryl, right, of the Los Angeles Police Department?
20 years.
20-year veteran. It almost doesn't make a difference once you get past 2 or 3. I mean, wow, just amazing. Now, you have testified in a courtroom also before. I saw this defense attorney here do something a little bit sneaky before, tricks of the trade, as I call them. One Officer Forcade was obviously getting the attention of the jury. He asked that Officer Forcade go back to his seat, you know, and not be near the jury, which is near where the boards were. When you're on the stand at any time, do you notice that about different attorneys, and how do you deal with it as a witness?
No, you know, personally, I don't. I'm singularly focused on just presenting my information and doing it in a clear and concise way so that the jury is understanding the points that I'm trying to make. I'm not preoccupied by anything else that's going on or tactics, because I understand that sometimes, you know, defense attorneys will say things to try to anger me, right? And so I'm not moved or swayed by any of that.
Well, I don't think you can get, just for the little bit that you and I have had an interaction, I don't believe that you could ever get flustered in a courtroom by any cross-examination. We have a new witness on the stand. I'm going to tell you the witness's name in about a second. But before I do that, Cheryl, one other question to you. This is a case where this man, and I always get choked up over it, people that are killed in front of their children. He died in front of his 5-year-old children. When you're a police officer, you do take that into account when you're dealing with the victims, don't you?
Well, you want to be sensitive, right? And listen, I'm a mom. I've got 4 sons. And so if I were the first responder on that scene, I would have had complete and particular empathy for the mother of that child, because she was there on scene as well. And I'm thinking she was expecting another child as well. And so, you know, it breaks my heart, because this child is going to be forever changed, as will the mom who witnessed her boyfriend be killed in her presence. As
will the other children in the car. Let's listen to another police officer who also is involved in this case. Okay, so when we have this procedural issues, and it's very important, you know, you're taking in front of a jury, you have a paper, right, and it's a closed envelope, and then the police officer takes the cartridge or the bullet or a casing out in front of a jury, and you see it, especially if it's like a medical examiner situation where you're taking the cartridge that is killing somebody out. Cheryl Dorsey, when you were a police officer, you knew that that would have some effect on a jury, right?
Well, yeah, because, you know, it's almost like getting to hear from the victim, right? You're seeing sometimes even the projectile that's removed from the body. I mean, it's kind of gory and graphic, right? But it helps to really paint a picture, and that's what folks in the jury are looking for.
And it brings Mr. McLaughlin home, right? It brings him home to a jury that there is a life that has been taken by a gun, really, is what it comes down to. It's making it real in that courtroom, doesn't it?
It personalizes the story, so he's not a name on a piece of paper. He's not a statistic. He's not a number. This is a real live human being who had this thing in their body, or who had this bullet, you know, traverse their body, and here's the aftermath of that. And so it makes it very real.
And I will say that if you know that police officers as calm as Cheryl Dorsey have that effect, and it has that effect on me, you can imagine the effect it is having on the jury. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us here at the Law&Crime Network. We are in the case of Florida versus Michael Drejka.